You've found just stories, simple, heartfelt moments from real lives, stories that remind us how connected we all are through love, loss, and hope. Get cozy. The stories are about to begin. Nicholas walked unhurriedly along the narrow, dusty street, heading towards the small provincial town that bore the strange name of Northwood. His arrival was due to business necessity. First a flight to the regional center, and then another couple of hours of tiresome shaking on the commuter train. The journey had been long, but Nicholas didn't complain. From childhood, he had a weakness for travel, so he perceived business trips as exciting adventures. Usually, his work visits were to large cities. The company where he held the position of chief economist specialized in the sale of household appliances. It was a vast, successful network with branches across the country, the number of which was steadily growing. And so now Nicholas had arrived in Northwood to settle important formalities related to the opening of another store in their network here. Everything went smoothly. Issues were resolved, necessary documents signed. Nicholas handled such tasks easily. It was his natural element. The next morning, the commuter train to the regional city awaited him, and from there, a plane home to his native Preston. Yes, the head office of this large company was located precisely there, in his hometown, which turned out to be a very fortunate arrangement. The evening promised to be free. The man decided to take a walk around the town, look around, examine the local sights, or perhaps find a cozy cafe to rest a little. Northwood appealed to him, quiet, peaceful. Life here probably flows measuredly, without haste. In such places, most likely, everyone knows each other. Surely here, unlike bustling megacities, good neighborliness is still alive. People gather together, communicate. Nicholas was almost certain. He only needed to turn into one of the local courtyards, and a picture from the past would appear before his eyes. Elderly people on benches discussing the news, children screaming and laughing, playing in the sandbox, men bent over repairing someone's car, women who had finished their household chores, having unhurried conversations on the porch or by the front garden. All this vividly reminded Nicholas of his own childhood. Every summer, at least for a week or two, his mother would send him to visit her former in-laws, Nick's father's parents. How the boy looked forward to those days. His mother and father divorced when Nicholas was very young. He, of course, didn't remember those events, but his mother held a grudge against his father, believing that her husband had left her for a new woman. With her, he later moved to distant Vladivostok, where her parents lived. So, for the sake of her parents, she couldn't stay, but he abandoned everything here, his mother exclaimed bitterly, often returning in her memories to that difficult period. And your father doesn't need his own son, nor his own mother and father. He completely lost his mind at the sight of a pretty face and long legs. Nicholas found it unpleasant to listen to such words about his father. But on the other hand, his parent really showed no interest in him. In Vladivostok, he had other children born, a son and a daughter, it seemed. So, Nicholas's half-siblings. Perhaps his father had enough heirs and wasn't drawn to the eldest. Or maybe the new wife was against his communication with the child from his first marriage. Who knows? He transferred alimony regularly, but he took no part in his son's life, never even wished him a happy birthday once. But his paternal grandparents lived relatively close, about 100 kilometers from Preston, in a large village. They waited for their grandson all year, preparing for his arrival. For those 2 weeks, all their attention was focused on him. Nicholas literally bathed in warmth, love, and care. Delicious lunches and dinners, fishing trips with his grandfather, nights in a tent in the middle of a clear field, swimming in the river with the local kids. If it were Nick's will, he would spend the whole summer in the village with his grandparents, and they would have been only too happy. Nicholas knew this, but he had to be content with little. It was good that he had at least this. Incidentally, neither his grandmother nor grandfather ever spoke ill of their grandson's mother. On the contrary, they instilled in the boy that it was hard for his mother alone, and her son should help her. But his parent often spoke dismissively of her in-laws. They couldn't even raise their own child properly. They never left the village their whole lives, and they talk ungrammatically. And sometimes his grandmother and grandfather told their grandson about the childhood of their son, Nicholas's father. These were usually cheerful stories that made the boy smile or laugh out loud. They were like a collection of stories like Dennis's. Nicholas heartily laughed at his parents' pranks and sincerely couldn't understand how such a boy, cheerful, brave, capable of friendship and taking risks, could abandon him, his own son. Did he really not even think about him? Was he really not interested in how his firstborn was doing, what he had become? Later, Nicholas learned that his father had tried to keep in touch with his son at first. He called, asked to be put on the phone, sent postcards, toys. His mother, out of resentment and a desire for revenge, gave her ex-husband not the slightest chance. She herself told Nicholas about this when he was already an adult. It happened on the day the guy learned about his father's death. He, a man who was still quite young, was struck down by a heart attack. Nicholas barely knew this person, but a feeling of irreparable loss enveloped him then, like a concrete slab. Yes, his father hadn't participated in his life, but Nicholas assumed that in the future they would definitely meet, talk, figure everything out, maybe even start communicating. And now nothing could be fixed. It was all over. It was then, on that day, that his mother spoke good things about Nicholas's father for the first time in her life. It turned out that when the young couple had a baby, the inexperienced young mother was afraid to bathe him. The young father handled this perfectly. He also got up to the child at night, seeing how worn out his wife was during the day. And he ran to the milk kitchen, standing in line for hours after work. But she also told him about his father's attempts to communicate with Nicholas. "Yes, he wanted to contact you," his mother confessed, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. "But I was so offended by him. Well, and I sincerely believed that nothing would work out. He's in Vladivostok. We're here, on the other side of the country. We wouldn't be able to see each other often anyway. Better not to know such a father at all than to tear your heart and miss him." Nicholas forgave and understood his mother. He had always felt sorry for her his whole life. After all, she raised him alone, dedicated herself entirely to him, never married a second time. Thanks to her efforts, Nicholas became who he is now, a wealthy and very successful man. From an early age, his mother instilled in her son that he was obliged to get a higher education. She herself had finished a vocational school in her time and worked as a seamstress in an atelier near their home her whole life, often taking orders home as well. Nicholas liked to listen to the whirring of the sewing machine. He could watch his mother work for a long time. It was interesting to see this amazing transformation. Just a moment ago, there was just a piece of fabric on the table. A little time passed, and it was transformed beyond recognition. Now it was a beautiful skirt, or a summer dress, or a robe. His mother was almost a real magician. By the way, this work brought the small family a quite decent income. In childhood, Nicholas knew no refusal in anything. His clothes were always fashionable, his toys beautiful. He had a bicycle, interesting books, ice cream almost every day. And they lived with his mother in a good apartment. Everything was there. Comfortable, beautiful furniture, household appliances, even decorative figurines. Once a year, mother and son definitely went to the sea. Nicholas felt like a perfectly happy person. "Study hard, son," his mother instructed her only child. "You'll study, get a higher education, become a great person, then we'll live well." The boy thought they were already living quite well, even now, but he certainly listened to his parents' words, especially since he always liked to study, and he did it without much effort, almost an all-around excellent student throughout his school years. University life completely captivated Nicholas. At the university, he met very interesting people. Student parties, trips to nature, joint preparation for exams, and then celebrating the end of the session. All this resembled a colorful carousel. Nicholas felt happy. He was in his element. His mother was a little frightened by all these parties. She often warned her son against reckless actions. "Be careful, son. You know you need to be cautious. Everything is good for you now. A wonderful future awaits you. but it's very easy to lose everything. Very easy. Then followed lectures on the harm of drinking, the danger of getting into trouble or being beaten, the risk of getting too carried away with parties and failing the next session. And his mother was also afraid of greedy girls who, of course, dreamed of getting pregnant by promising guys and thus ruining their lives right at the beginning. Nicholas was amused by these maternal fears. The son perfectly understood and controlled himself. The guy tried to calm his parent, explained to her that he had a head on his shoulders, but she just couldn't understand that her son had already grown up, become almost an adult. She still felt that she had to protect him, cushion his falls wherever possible, be by his side. Nicholas, remembering his student years, smiled. His mother is the same now, still worrying about her only son, still trying to arrange his life. Now his parent had a new fixation. Her son, a grown, established man, is already approaching 40, and he is still unmarried. It's not right. His mother persistently tried to set up her long independent son with the daughters of her friends and acquaintances. Good girls from decent families. It was funny and at the same time maximally awkward. Nicholas wasn't angry with his mother. He treated her concern with indulgence, understanding. His parents simply wanted the best for her son in her understanding of best. Nicholas himself was quite happy living as a bachelor. Is it bad? You're only responsible for yourself. You do what you want. You don't report to anyone. But you couldn't explain that to his mother. Nicholas, of course, had brief romances from time to time. Some of his partners tried to ring the gentleman, but nothing came of it. Nicholas firmly suppressed such attempts and immediately broke off the relationships. He didn't need a family. Why? What if he didn't turn out to be a good husband and father? There are few happy couples. Mostly everyone is constantly arguing, sorting things out, dividing something. And look how many divorces there are. Adults can't sort things out between themselves and then the children suffer. No, Nicholas didn't want that for himself. And it wasn't easy. Once, many years ago, Nicholas was sure he had met the love of his life. These were sincere and very strong feelings. Nicholas felt then as if the whole world had been transformed, become brighter, friendlier, warmer, and then disappointment and almost physical pain. The guy didn't want to live. He barely clawed his way out then, thanks to his mother, by the way, who found a good psychotherapist. It's scary to think what might have happened if not for that specialist, who, incidentally, turned out to be a professional in his field. No, Nicholas didn't want such upheavals again, so he consciously chose a life where work occupied the central place. True, his mother still couldn't come to terms with this. She wanted to see her son arm in arm with a wife, surrounded by sweet little ones. But never mind, she'd get over it somehow. His feet carried Nicholas to the station square. This was not surprising. In small towns, all roads lead to the station. Well, he could have dinner somewhere here. Surely there would be a suitable cafe nearby, or maybe even a canteen. For some reason, Nicholas suddenly craved homemade food, the kind you can only find in canteens. Just as if on cue, a sign caught the man's eye. Canteen. Nicholas walked quickly towards the eatery. He needed to cross the square with a fountain. It was near this very fountain that the man was stopped by a shaky, dry, and cracked voice. "Young man, it's awkward to ask, but there's no other way. Please help if you can." Nicholas turned around and saw an old woman, stooped, furrowed with wrinkles, dressed in an old faded dress, a bright scarf on her head, worn dusty sneakers on her feet. But her eyes, the blue eyes clearly belonged to a woman who wasn't that old. They looked timid and somehow guilty. Perhaps she was a beggar, the same age as Nicholas's mother, but this way of life had aged her, turned her into a stooped old woman. Of course, the man nodded and began rummaging in his pockets. Had he brought cash? Nicholas usually paid with a card, but this time he found several 1,000-ruble bills. Without hesitation, he immediately gave them to the woman, because, well, it was clear that she was in great need. There was so much hope in her eyes. The old woman didn't look like the brazen professional beggars. "Is this all for me?" the stranger asked in surprise, seeing the bills in Nicholas's hand. "Yes, The man nodded. Thank you, dear. God grant you health for your generosity and kindness. I'm not asking for myself, you understand? Nicholas wanted to continue on his way, but he saw that it was important for the old woman to explain herself or even justify herself to him, and so the man didn't hurry. Let her speak her mind. It wasn't difficult for him to listen, and it would make the person feel better. I have a grandson, Stevie. His mother, my daughter, died, so I'm raising him as best I can. We don't have enough money. I can't work anymore. I've become old and sick. I have to ask for help from good people at the station. Don't think I'm asking for money for drink. And I'm not lazy. I bent my back my whole life, working as a cleaner. If it weren't for my illness, I'd still be working now. I wouldn't need help. But I can't. For Stevie's sake, I only go around with my hand out for him. He's growing. He needs to be fed well, clothed, educated. Ah, you have a difficult fate. Nicholas shook his head. You're doing a great job not abandoning the boy. How old is he, Stevie? The old woman smiled. It was clear that she enjoyed talking about her grandson. He's 12. He's handsome and smart, learns easily. He has a clear head. But he suffers because of our destitute situation. He sees how hard it is for me, and he tries to earn some money. Sometimes he washes cars in the parking lot. Sometimes he mows lawns for people. He gets pennies, sometimes nothing at all. People are different. They often cheat the boys, and he spends a lot of time, comes home tired, then he's not up for homework. So his studies are slipping. I tell him, "Study, Stephen. Your main job now is studying. You don't need to work so much, I'll manage. And you need to study, to get on your feet later." But he doesn't listen to me. He doesn't listen. He doesn't listen, Nicholas repeated. This story had somehow touched him. The man wanted to know more about the old woman and her grandson's life. Is it hard for you with him? No. What are you saying? The beggar woman exclaimed, throwing up her hands. You misunderstood. Stevie is a very good boy. He takes care of me, does everything around the house. He only doesn't listen to me in the sense that he continues to work. It's hard for him. My heart breaks for him. Stevie should be in a good family. He's talented. He would make something of himself. But I'm afraid he'll ruin all his abilities with me. That's what I'm worried about. With these words, the old woman adjusted the scarf on her head. When the woman raised her hand, the sleeve of her calico dress slightly lifted, and Nicholas's eyes beheld a bracelet, a thin gold chain with 3 heart-shaped pendants. The man stared, stunned, at the exquisite piece of jewelry. No, it wasn't the mere fact of an expensive item on the wrist of a poor old woman that struck him. It was just that many years ago, he had ordered exactly the same bracelet from a jewelry workshop for the girl he considered his soulmate, the one he wanted to live a long life with and grow old in a cozy little house somewhere by the sea. And it was she, that young beauty, who became the biggest disappointment in his life. There, on those heart pendants, their names were engraved, Nicholas and Sarah, and the third heart was inlaid with a diamond. Nicholas had spent all his savings on the jewelry then. What was this? Just a similar bracelet? Or that very one? It wasn't difficult to find out, but it felt strange, almost frightening. The old woman caught Nicholas's gaze and smiled. I know what you thought. She's pretending to be a beggar, but she's wearing gold. But you're wrong. This is a memento of my daughter. In the most difficult times, I couldn't part with this item. Sally loved this bracelet so much. It meant a lot to her. That's why I haven't taken it off since that terrible day, when Sarah... Nicholas felt as if a bucket of icy water had been poured over him. His heart first constricted, then began to beat at an accelerated pace. His temples pounded, and colorful spots blurred before his eyes. Sarah. The girl with whom Nicholas wanted to link his life, for whom he had ordered the bracelet then, her name was also Sarah. So, could it be? No, it simply couldn't be. Do you have time now? Nicholas asked. Yes, the old woman replied. She looked at the man suspiciously, who had first easily given her what she considered a huge amount of money, and was now acting so strangely. "Why? We need to talk," Nicholas said. I think I once knew your daughter. This bracelet, and her name, it all matches. Maybe we can sit down?" "All right." The old woman nodded and headed towards an empty bench in front of the fountain. Nicholas trailed behind her. Nicholas met Sarah during the summer holidays, before his last 5th year of university. He had come back to the familiar university buildings for mandatory work duty. The building had just been renovated, and students were washing paint off the corridors along with a professional crew. Sarah was part of this renovation crew, a fragile, large-eyed girl. Nicholas noticed her immediately. Cheerful, pure, radiant. There was something so captivating in her gaze. The guy constantly tried to catch her eye. When he succeeded, Sarah would blush and lower her lashes, and Nicholas felt happy. His heart would sweetly skip a beat every time he was near this wonderful girl. And this happened often. Nicholas deliberately lingered nearby. It was surprising that no one else noticed Sarah's unique beauty. Not even Mike, Nicholas's classmate, the acknowledged local Don Juan, who never missed a beautiful girl. He didn't pay any attention to Sarah at all. Well, all the better. Because Mike knew how to handle girls. A few words, and any beauty was his. Nicholas didn't want Sarah to become one of Mike's trophies. Seeing Sarah dragging a heavy bucket of water, Nicholas dropped everything he was doing and was by her side. "Let me take that." The guy snatched the heavy load from Sarah's fragile, graceful hands. "Where do you need it?" "To the 2nd floor." The girl didn't argue. They talked on the way. Sarah turned out to be a simple and modest girl. It was easy and pleasant for Nicholas to talk to her. Sarah, it seemed, also liked the handsome, smiling guy. The students' work duty lasted a couple of hours, but the renovation crew worked a full day. On the day they met, Nicholas stayed with Sarah. He helped her until the end of her shift. He didn't want to part with her even for a few hours. After the girls' workday ended, the young people went to the cinema. Nicholas held Sarah's hand in his, and knew that right now his life was taking a serious turn. Nothing like this had ever happened to him before. No other person had ever meant so much to him. Nicholas and Sarah started dating. Gradually, the young people became closer, getting to know each other better. Both were raised without fathers. Sarah had never known hers at all, and seemed not to be bothered by it in the least. Both had only mothers. But while Nicholas's mother did everything to ensure her son had a higher education and a prosperous, happy life, Sarah's mother didn't have that opportunity. She worked as a cleaner, earning pennies. Sarah helped her from an early age. After 9th grade, the girl went to a construction technical school. She didn't even dream of higher education. "I need to work. Money is needed. No time to sit around in classrooms." After finishing technical school, the girl got a job in the renovation crew and finally started earning a salary. Now there was more money in their small family, and this was very timely, as the mother and daughter had to rent an apartment. They had no place of their own, and prices were rising quickly. That's how they lived. They didn't starve, it seemed, but the money was only enough for the bare necessities. Nicholas was sure that he and Sarah would get married. He saw no other destiny for himself. Sarah was completely his person, so sensitive, so kind and fragile. Nicholas wanted to protect and cherish her. She had a hard job. When they got married, Sarah wouldn't do this, wouldn't carry heavy buckets, wouldn't breathe paint fumes. No, Nicholas would have a good profession, and therefore he could count on a high-paying job. The husband would fully support the family, and Sarah could do whatever she wanted, manage the house, the family, or go back to school. Of course, Nicholas shared his thoughts with his mother. He was generally used to telling her everything. "Have you lost your mind?" his parent exclaimed in horror upon hearing her only son's revelations. "How many times have I told you this? You're a guy from a well-off family, a student at a prestigious university with good prospects. We have a large apartment after all. Do you even imagine that girls from poor families are hunting for guys like you? Do you know how many are eager to ride into a comfortable life on someone else's back? No, Mom, Sarah, she's completely different. You'll understand everything when you meet her." You don't understand much. There will be tons of Sarahs in your life instead of this Sarah. What wedding? You need a completely different girl from a good family with a higher education. And these provincial girls, they only want one thing. They'll have a child by a good guy, and then, manipulating the child, they'll twist him around their finger, and his relatives, by the way, too. No matter how Nicholas tried to make his mother understand that Sarah was a completely different matter, she wouldn't listen. In the end, the guy decided, come what may. Even if his mother didn't agree with his choice, he would still do everything his own way. True, the wedding would have to be postponed now. His mother would never agree to Nicholas bringing a wife into their shared apartment. She was set against Sarah. So, living together wouldn't lead to anything good. There was only one way out. Get on his feet as quickly as possible, earn money for a separate place, and only then propose to his beloved. Without Sarah, Nicholas couldn't imagine his life anymore. Next to her, he felt strong, almost omnipotent, and at the same time very vulnerable, a strange feeling. His heart belonged to Sarah. She could do whatever she wanted with him. But the girl treated Nicholas very gently, took care of him, constantly tried to make him laugh. And when Sarah rested her head on the guy's shoulder, in those moments he felt like the happiest person in the world. The offer of an internship abroad came to Nicholas unexpectedly. He was just finishing his diploma work. Graduation was just around the corner. Finally, the guy would have his diploma. He could work, earn money. Nicholas planned to immediately start saving for housing. Let it be a small apartment in an old building somewhere on the outskirts for now. The main thing was that there would be a place where he and Sarah could start their family life. Quiet, calm, measured, and undoubtedly very happy. One day, the rector summoned Nicholas. It turned out that a foreign partner was offering the university a profitable contract. They needed bright graduates, students. He would have to spend 3 years in a foreign country and work hard, but the salary offered was something a young specialist couldn't find in the city. Nicholas immediately calculated in his mind, this money would be enough for a very decent apartment, and the experience gained abroad would increase his value as a specialist. Upon returning, Nicholas would easily find a high-paying job. Of course, the guy gladly agreed. True, he would have to part with Sarah for 3 long years. They wouldn't see each other. They would have almost no opportunity to communicate, only perhaps through correspondence, and for a whole 3 years, a monstrous period. On the other hand, this was the only chance to quickly get on his feet. He had to endure, survive this separation. This was the real test of feelings. Nicholas was sure that they would both pass it with dignity. Sarah was upset when she learned about her beloved's plans, even cried a little, but she understood that this was the only way out of their difficult situation. Before leaving, Nicholas wanted to give his beloved a special gift, something memorable, something she would look at and remember him by. It was then that the guy went to the jewelry workshop. He decided to order an exclusive piece of jewelry for his beloved, something no one else had. Together with the master, the guy decided it should be a bracelet, elegant, fragile, like Sarah herself, with original heart-shaped pendants, with engraving. On 2 of the heart pendants, Nicholas asked to engrave their names, and the third the master decorated with an exquisite stone, a diamond. The master named the sum for the materials and work. It was all of Nicholas's savings, but the guy parted with them without any regrets. The bracelet was ready in a week. When Nicholas saw it, he sincerely admired it. Yes, this was exactly what he wanted. Not just a trinket, but a piece of jewelry with meaning and special energy. Sarah's eyes lit up with joy at the sight of the gift. True, she immediately became shy. It must be incredibly expensive, a gold piece and custom-made too. You deserve the very best, Nicholas smiled, and you'll have it all when I return. Let the bracelet remind you of me in my absence and bring you joy. I won't take it off at all, Sarah promised and hugged her beloved. His mother, unlike Sarah, greeted the news of her son's internship with joy. What a smart boy you are, she smiled proudly, looking at Nicholas. After all, they offered this internship to you, not to anyone else. That means they value you, and the trip will be good for you. You'll get that poor little bride out of your head, and your brain will be back in place. Nicholas didn't argue with his mother then. No, he wouldn't forget his beloved girl for a minute there, in a foreign land. Moreover, this whole internship was only for her sake. After all, without the trip, they wouldn't get their own place so quickly. And this way, Nicholas would soon be an independent man, ready to start a family. He would have to work hard for happiness. And Nicholas worked his fingers to the bone. It was hard. He had to deal with complex financial reports, overcome the language barrier, learn everything anew. But Nicholas managed. He had a goal, and he walked towards it with a confident and firm step. The guy often called his mother, dialing her from the office or the hotel reception. She was so happy with these calls, showering her son with compliments and questions. But with Sarah, he had to correspond. She didn't have a landline phone at home, so Nicholas had nowhere to call to talk to his beloved. He missed her voice so much, he started longing for it almost immediately after he left. The correspondence didn't last long either. After a couple of months, letters stopped arriving for the girl. Nicholas himself wrote, writing almost every week. But did Sarah receive his messages? Probably not. Otherwise, she would have definitely replied. "Mom, do you know what happened?" Nicholas asked, perplexed, during a phone conversation with his parent. "Do you know why Sarah isn't answering my letters?" "How would I know?" his mother replied reluctantly. "Maybe your little flirt ran off with someone? They're like that." "You're not telling me something. I'll drop everything and fly home tomorrow. I need to make sure she's all right." "Don't you dare!" his mother exclaimed, frightened. "Everything is fine with her. She's waiting for you. It's just that there's trouble with international mail right now. We have temporary problems with international communication in the country. That's why letters aren't getting here. And they're not going out either. So don't worry. Just work calmly." It was hard to live without any contact with his beloved during those years. His mother spoke reluctantly about Sarah, preferring to change the subject. When her son insisted too much, she would give some facts, saying everything was fine. Sarah was alive and well, working. Nicholas often asked his mother to arrange a phone call with Sarah. He wanted to hear her voice, to know how his beloved was doing. But his parent was adamant. "There will be no Sarahs in my house," his mother invariably replied. Nicholas was angry with his mother, but he understood that she had the right to say and think that. It was indeed her apartment, and she wasn't obliged to let in someone she couldn't stand. Nicholas had no doubt. When he returned home and married Sarah, his mother would have to meet the girl. And then his mother would see, would understand what a wonderful person Sarah was. She would accept her. She would definitely change her opinion of her. That's how it would be. The sooner the better. The 3 years of internship, on the one hand, flew by quickly. Nicholas had a lot of work, many complex and interesting tasks. This was engaging and brought in good money. On the other hand, 3 years without his beloved seemed like an eternity to Nicholas. He missed Sarah's voice, her eyes, her scent, her touch. He dreamed of her, saw her in girls he met. Nicholas didn't look at anyone else during this time. Although he had options, there were many young female employees in the company who were not against starting a relationship with a hard-working, intelligent guy. But Nicholas only thought of Sarah. He didn't need anyone else. His mother, by the way, hoped that her son would find a decent girl in his new place. She often asked Nicholas if he had met someone. He had to disappoint her every time. Why would he need anyone else? Sarah was his destiny. The internship period was coming to an end. Nicholas had accumulated enough funds, enough for a very good apartment in Preston, with money left over for a car. In the week before his departure, Nicholas wandered through local supermarkets and chose gifts for Sarah, a beautiful dress, unusual jewelry, even toys. It was pleasant to guess what would bring joy to his beloved. His mother met Nicholas at the airport. Over the 3 years, she had changed a lot. She had gained weight, had more wrinkles, and more gray hair. Nicholas was happy to see his loved one. Mother and son hugged tightly and went home. "You've grown up a lot." His mother didn't take her eyes off her son. You've become a real man. So handsome. Tall. Nicholas smiled. He felt the same way. Youth was behind him. He had become a completely adult man, fully ready to start a family. The man and his mother no longer spoke about Sarah. What for? Mentioning that girl always made his parent lose her temper. The guy was in a hurry to get home. He couldn't wait to leave his things, take a shower, and run to her, to Sarah. Surely she wasn't home now. The day was in full swing. Sarah was most likely at work. Then he would ask her mother where to find the girl. Nicholas couldn't wait until the end of the workday. He had dreamed of this meeting for 3 whole years. He definitely couldn't wait a few more hours. He needed to see her, hear her beloved voice, look into her familiar eyes. "Are you going to see her?" his mother asked Nicholas when he was already near the front door. The guy didn't deny it. To her. "Well, good luck," his parent said, twisting her lips scornfully. Nicholas had never been to Sarah's place, but he knew the address well. He had walked her to her building many times. The girl lived on Factory Street in a former barracks. It was a 2-story, dilapidated wooden building. The disadvantaged area had become even more neglected over these 3 years. Mountains of garbage around, dusty, unpaved paths, overgrown weeds everywhere. Nicholas climbed the creaky stairs to the 2nd floor. Here was the right door. First, he pressed the doorbell, but realizing it didn't work, he knocked decisively. The door didn't open immediately. It took about 2 minutes. Standing on the threshold was an elderly man in a greasy robe, with a sharp, unkind gaze and patchy gray hair. Who was this? Sarah said she lived with her mother. Who was this old man? "Good afternoon," Nicholas greeted politely. "I'd like to speak with someone from the apartment's owners." "He's right in front of you, in person," the man smiled proudly. "What did you want to talk about? I won't invite you in. My grandchildren are here now. They're sleeping. I wouldn't want to wake them." Of course," Nicholas hastily agreed. An elderly man? Grandchildren? Maybe he had the wrong door. "Well, what's the matter?" The elderly man waited and seemed to be losing patience. "You see, I'm looking for my girlfriend, Sarah. I must have the wrong apartment, but she definitely lives somewhere nearby, somewhere close by. Can you tell me? Your neighbor's apparently Sarah." The man shook his head. "Sarah and Valentina, her mother? Yes, they lived here, but they moved somewhere in a hurry. This is my apartment. They rented it from me. I don't know why they suddenly decided to leave so unexpectedly, as if they were running from someone. Well, it suited me. My son had children born, twins right away, so we moved here. This apartment is more spacious after all. They left. And by any chance, do you know where and why?" "No, they didn't report to me, and I didn't ask. I don't need extra information. I'm not used to prying into people's lives at all. The mother and daughter packed their things in one evening, paid me, and that was it. From their conversation, I understood they were going to another city somewhere. Which one exactly, I don't know." Nicholas understood then that he had lost Sarah, lost her forever. But the guy didn't give up right away. He started a whole investigation. He even went to Sarah's former workplace, found her friends there, talked to them. They knew nothing about where Sarah and her mother had gone. She hadn't discussed her plans with them. Sal became strange then, long before that departure. Claire, Sarah's colleague and friend, readily shared her memories. At first, she was very sad when you left for your internship. Then suddenly she became somehow joyful. But it was a quiet joy. She glowed from within. We thought maybe she fell in love again, but she denied it. Something was definitely happening with her. I know her well. Then something happened again. Sal was pale, frightened, bewildered. I tried to find out what was wrong, if I could help her in any way. I felt sorry for her, but you couldn't get a word out of her with pliers. And then suddenly this departure. Nothing was clear about her, in short. Having found out nothing from Sarah's acquaintances, Nicholas went to the police with a statement about his beloved girl's disappearance. They just laughed at him there. They explained that Sarah and her mother were adults and could move freely around the world without informing anyone. Maybe she ran away from you? A young man in uniform smirked, looking at the bewildered Nicholas. She doesn't want to communicate anymore, and you don't understand words. So she left. It happens. You're not a relative of mine. I can't accept your statement. There are no grounds. After some time, Nicholas lost hope. He realized that he would never find Sarah now in the vast expanse of the country. His beloved girl and her mother had never had a place of their own, so they could easily leave for any city. Trying to find them was like looking for a needle in a haystack. But why? Why did Sarah do this? Did she really fall out of love and run away? Or did something happen in her life? But what difference did it make now? It was clear they would never see each other again. And then the guy fell into despair. While he was running around the city, doing something, searching, hoping, it seemed to him that everything was still fixable. But now Nicholas knew. Sarah had disappeared forever. His plans for a wedding, children, a long life together were not meant to be. So what was the internship for? What was he saving money for? Why did he leave at all? Nicholas suddenly realized that he didn't want to live at all. What was the point? Sarah wasn't around anyway, and she certainly wouldn't be. Nicholas now thought about the reasons for her disappearance from morning till night. He lay in his room, the door closed, listening to sad music and thinking. Maybe Claire was right? Did Sarah meet someone else? Or did she simply not endure waiting for her beloved for so long and left to seek a new life because staying here was unbearable? In any case, she easily erased Nicholas from her destiny, didn't even leave him a note or a message. She could have sent it through Claire, or through his mother, his failed mother-in-law. So, Nicholas meant nothing to her? Sarah was the whole world to the guy, the meaning of life, and he was just an acquaintance she enjoyed spending time with. He didn't want to live. Nicholas ate almost nothing, didn't answer numerous calls, didn't talk to his worried mother, who kept trying to reach her grown child. "What are you suffering for? What are you upset about?" she asked. "Well, the girl didn't wait. It happens, and it's very common. She went on with her life. You go on with yours. This is a normal situation, and you're making a universal tragedy out of it." Perhaps his mother wanted to alleviate her son's condition, but her lamentations only made him feel heavier at heart. Mom. She didn't understand anything. She simply couldn't look into Nicholas's heart and understand what was happening there. And there was so much pain, so much despair and black hopelessness that Nicholas couldn't imagine how to continue existing with such a burden. In the end, his mother found her son a psychotherapist. This happened after he refused to eat for 2 whole days. The woman couldn't even get Nicholas to touch food. That's when she got truly scared. Scared that her son would simply die. A short, elderly man in a simple black t-shirt and jeans came to their apartment. He was probably just over 50, with noble gray hair at his temples, strong, horn-rimmed glasses. His mother had called the specialist to the house because she understood that the chances of her son voluntarily going to a clinic were minimal. Nicholas had no idea how much effort it had cost his mother to arrange this visit, and money, by the way. This man, he just sat nearby and said something in a low voice. Nicholas didn't listen at first. Then he became interested. The psychotherapist somehow miraculously helped him. Apparently, he was a professional in his field. After several sessions, Nicholas felt like a completely different person. He understood that life goes on even without Sarah, that there was still much that was interesting and important in the world. It was selfish and foolish to spend time like this, in sorrow, lying on the bed and doing nothing. The girl's disappearance was her choice, and her right. No person is the property of another. If she wanted to, she left. She knew where to find Nicholas. If she had even the slightest desire, Sarah would have already shown up. It's not to say that Nicholas felt happy. No, the longing for his beloved was still very strong. But at least he had the strength. The guy realized it was time to act. Look for a job, somehow settle into this life. The psychotherapist advised him to finish the course of treatment at the clinic, but Nicholas refused. He felt that he had already received sufficient help. Now he could manage on his own. Getting a job was not difficult. With such experience and track record, Nicholas was hired as a senior economist in a local household appliance trading company. The salary immediately turned out to be more than decent. The young man was also promised career growth if he proved himself. And Nicholas planned to prove himself. How he planned. Somehow he needed to distract himself from sad thoughts. If he stopped, the black melancholy would drag him back into its swamp. The guy felt this. Nicholas worked hard and quickly achieved success. Life gradually changed from black and white to color. First, a dull gray, then bright, full, juicy. When there is money, the world acquires a special attractiveness. Nicholas could now afford a lot and did. Trips to exotic corners of the planet, vacations at expensive resorts, beautiful cars, and girls, of course. A young, handsome, wealthy man naturally had no shortage of choices. His mother seemed happy for her son at first. She had genuinely feared for his life back then. The sight of the listless man spending his days on the sofa behind his closed bedroom door frightened the woman. But after years, Nicholas's overly free lifestyle began to bother her. "You need to get married, son." The man heard this phrase from his mother more and more often each year. But he couldn't agree with his parent. Nicholas was fine as he was. He felt free and almost happy. Serious relationships. He had already been through that and certainly didn't want to repeat. If you love someone, become so attached to someone that you can't breathe without that person, you become very fragile and vulnerable. Nicholas still remembered the pain Sarah's disappearance had caused him. No, thank you. Enough. Love, serious relationships. In Nicholas's mind, all this meant the end of freedom. A person in love no longer belongs to himself. The object of his feelings can do whatever they want with him, even twist him around their finger. Therefore, at his age, Nicholas didn't even think about getting married. And there was still plenty of time ahead. He wasn't even 40 yet. He could do it later if he wanted to. His mother scared him with lonely old age and the fact that he, Nicholas, would have no one to give him a glass of water before he died. This argument didn't convince the man at all. He jokingly replied to his mother that he wasn't sure he would even want to drink at such a moment. And it was foolish to give up a happy bachelor life for a vague prospect, especially since he had enough female companionship. Nicholas tried not to think about Sarah, but she still periodically surfaced in his thoughts. Sometimes she appeared in his dreams. Sometimes he saw her in girls walking towards him. The man had learned to cope with his emotions. He hadn't completely erased the girl he once loved from his heart, but now Sarah didn't prevent him from living and enjoying life. Nicholas had managed to leave her in the past, or so it seemed to him. All these memories and thoughts flashed through Nicholas's mind as he walked with the old woman towards the bench in front of the fountain. The man saw the bracelet, and in an instant, all his feigned nonchalance vanished somewhere. He felt again that he still longed for Sarah and clearly realized that he would give up all his wealth and easily part with his notorious freedom just to have her by his side. But the old woman had said that Sarah was no longer alive. Nicholas was afraid even to think about it, hoping that he had misunderstood something or that there had been some mistake. "So, you say you knew my Sally?" The old woman looked at Nicholas intently. "Yes," the man nodded. "This bracelet, I think I recognize it. Can I look closer?" The old woman silently took the jewelry off her wrist and handed it to Nicholas. All this time she didn't take her eyes off him. The man's breath caught when the bracelet was in his hands. It was it. The very same one. There was no doubt. An exquisite, original piece. And yet, Nicholas carefully looked at the heart pendants. Yes, it was true. On 2 of them, names were engraved, and the third was adorned with a diamond. "I am that Nicholas." The man handed the bracelet back to its new owner. "I gave this bracelet to your daughter many years ago." "So that's who you are," the old woman shook her head. "Sarah was so in love with you then. Nothing like that had ever happened to her. And here she was, flying as if on wings. I told her not to get involved with people like that." "Like what?" Nicholas didn't understand. "Sons of rich parents. Rich. We weren't rich then. My mother raised me alone, just as you raised Sarah. But still, you weren't our equal. You studied at university. Your mother earned well, and considered everyone poorer than her son not a suitable match for him. Maybe she was right. I don't know. But there was one problem. She went against your love with Sally. I don't understand. Nicholas desperately wanted the old woman's face, Sarah's mother's face, to soften even a little. She was clearly offended by Nicholas. But what for? He had gone away for that internship for the sake of their happiness with Sarah. He had worked there for 3 years from dawn till dusk, earned money for an apartment, wanted to propose to his beloved, but couldn't find her in Preston, and later couldn't even find a trace of her. It was Sarah who disappeared, Sarah who ran away from him. You don't understand? The old woman's eyes seemed to see right through Nicholas. It was a carefully scrutinizing gaze. Well, maybe you've forgotten? Or maybe you never knew anything? Nicholas just shrugged. I looked for her, the man said. When I came back, I looked for Sarah everywhere. I went to your place, but completely different people were living there. I tried to find out something about Sarah at her former job. I even wanted to file a missing person report, but they refused. No one could tell me where Sarah had disappeared to. No one. Did you talk to your mother? The old woman clarified. Yes, she wasn't aware either. Nicholas understood from the words and expression on his companion's face that his mother was somehow involved in this story. Nothing could be changed or fixed now, but anxiety was rising in his heart. Nicholas was worried. His heart felt like it would jump out of his chest. Was he about to learn the truth? The truth he had sought for so long? The old woman fidgeted with the bracelet on her wrist and looked somewhere into the distance. Her gaze was slightly clouded. She must have been transported back in time, reliving some important events for her. Nicholas wanted to snap her out of this stupor. It was important for him to know the truth, to hear Sarah's story as soon as possible. All these years, the man had lived in the firm belief that he had left the situation in the past. He had entertained himself, enjoyed all possible pleasures in life, worked hard. And now, a chance encounter had changed everything, brought to the surface feelings and emotions he had hidden even from himself for so long. Nicholas felt lost and vulnerable again. He felt the physical pain again of not being able to take Sarah's hand, to look into her eyes. It was important for the man to hear what had happened after he left the country as soon as possible. But the old woman sat, her lips stubbornly pressed together, staring into the distance. And Nicholas didn't dare disturb her. This was an elderly woman. She had gone through something very terrible and difficult. He had to give her time to collect her thoughts. Sally, she loved deeply. You were the most important person in the world to her, the old woman finally began her story. I noticed right away that something was off with her. She started staying late at work too often. And she came home so happy, she just glowed. It was immediately clear to me that it was about a guy. I didn't pry into my daughter's soul. I knew when the time came she would tell me herself. I just asked her to be careful. I thought someone from her crew had started courting her. But look how it turned out. Valentina raised her daughter alone. She was from a village, but Val didn't want to live in her hometown. The girl put a lot of effort into breaking free from there and settling in the city. It didn't turn out exactly as she had initially dreamed, of course, but it was still better than living in a village civilization. Val planned to enter a technical school after school. Nothing came of it. It turned out that it wasn't such a simple matter to become a student, even of a not particularly prestigious school, if you didn't have connections and money. Val didn't pass the competition, but she wasn't upset. She would stay in the city anyway. She had money for the first time. Her parents had provided it. Pennies, of course, but her mother and father had given their daughter everything they could, and Val appreciated it. The money was enough to rent a room in a dormitory. And then the young girl got a job as a cleaner in a small shop in the courtyard. She had known how to handle a mop since she was little. The work was familiar to her. That's how Valentina got her own source of income, and quite a good one, compared to village salaries. The following year, Val tried to enroll again, and again failed. The girl cried then, despaired, and decided, well, it's not meant to be, probably. So be it. Let everything go as it goes. She had a job, she had housing, even if it was rented. So she would get by somehow. Years passed. Val grew up, and from an awkward teenager, she turned into a pretty young woman. Men started looking at her. Val began to think about a family. She wanted to take care of children and a husband, make the apartment clean and cozy, cook delicious meals for her household. You wouldn't try so hard for yourself, would you? Cooking rich cabbage soup, baking pies. It was different with a husband and children. You would always want to please them. And then a suitable candidate came along. Lenny Miller, a loader at the store. Handsome, cheerful, never discouraged. Of course, not an oligarch, but Val wasn't a princess either. The girl was well aware that a professor's son or a young millionaire wasn't in her future. But with Lenny, you wouldn't be lost or bored. He was also from the village, so they had a lot in common and interesting things to talk about. Lenny was handy and reliable. With him, it was like being behind a stone wall. Lenny didn't make her wait. He quickly proposed to his beloved. They had a purely symbolic wedding, without a motorcade of decorated cars, a crowd of guests, a toastmaster. They didn't have the money for that. But Val did have a white dress, though not a lush floor-length one, without a veil, just a light, pretty snow-white sundress. The young couple, with a couple of friends and the bride's parents, sat in a restaurant, celebrated the event in a close circle, and dispersed. Lenny had been an orphan since he was 12, raised by his father's sister's family. The boy didn't get much love and attention there. They raised him to adulthood, and with a sense of duty fulfilled, pushed him into independent life, so the guy managed as best he could. Valentina dreamed that now their happy life would begin. It would definitely be easier to make their way together. They could do it. They rented not just a room in a dormitory anymore, but a whole separate one-room apartment. They could afford it on 2 salaries. Leonard had far-reaching plans. He was going to buy his own place. Val looked at her husband with hope and pride. Since Lenny said they would have their own apartment, it would happen. He wouldn't say such a thing for nothing. Only, the newlyweds' plans were not destined to come true. Leonard tried to earn a penny wherever he could. He moonlighted as a laborer on construction sites and helped unload wagons at the station. He didn't get enough sleep, didn't eat enough. When his wife, feeling sorry for her husband, persuaded Leonard to refuse another odd job, he just smiled. "When we earn enough for an apartment, then I'll lie on the sofa in front of the TV after work, annoying you. But for now, that won't work." Val felt sorry for her husband. She saw that he was very tired, had lost weight. His face was gray from lack of sleep, with dark circles under his eyes. The young woman's heart sensed that this wouldn't end well. And so it happened. The trouble occurred at night, when Val was fast asleep at home. Her husband had gone to another odd job. He was supposed to return in the morning, but he didn't come. Val got worried and went to the station. She knew that Leonard was supposed to be unloading a freight train. That's where they told her everything. It turned out that Leonard had already finished his part of the work. They had even paid him. The man was heading home, but for some reason he walked along the tracks and didn't hear the approaching train. And the engineer noticed the man sitting on the tracks too late in the dark. It's unclear why he was sitting there and didn't leave. Didn't he see or hear the train? Wondered the worker who told Val this story. But Valentina understood everything. Lenny was just very tired, completely exhausted. He probably fell asleep there, right on the tracks, didn't make it home, sat down for a second to rest and passed out. So, Valentina became a young widow. She took her husband's death hard. With him, her hopes for a strong, large family, her own apartment, and old age with her beloved person by her side disappeared. And during this difficult period of her life, Val suddenly realized that she was expecting a child. The news both delighted and upset the woman. It delighted her because Leonard, it turned out, hadn't disappeared without a trace. He would live on in their child. The news upset the future mother for many reasons. Firstly, Leonard hadn't had time to learn that they would have a baby. It was bitter and hurtful. He would have been so happy. He would have glowed with happiness. Secondly, how could she manage alone? Valentina's salary was barely enough for herself, and now a baby. That was quite a situation. After crying from joy, anxiety, and a whole bunch of other emotions overwhelming her, Valentina pulled herself together. She would manage. It was all right. She wasn't completely alone. She had parents in the village. They would help. But her husband's death wasn't the only blow fate had prepared for Val. Her parents. Val's mother and father. A tragedy also happened to them. There was a short circuit in their old house. The wooden dwelling burst into flames like a match, and Val's parents couldn't escape. Both died. Valentina just couldn't believe that all this was really happening to her. First her beloved husband, now her parents. No home, no loving and beloved people nearby. Val was left completely alone in this uncomfortable and, as it seemed then, hostile world. The young woman didn't want to drink or eat. She automatically went to work simply because she was used to it. She ate, it seemed, even talked to someone. But during this time, Val felt that what was happening around her was just a terrible dream, not real. Sometimes people seemed like actors to her, and the houses, furniture, trees, other details of the surroundings, cardboard decorations. Val felt as if she were observing herself from the outside. There were no tears, only a persistent heaviness in her soul. Sometimes panic would suddenly wash over her, making it hard to breathe. Val would gasp for air, seeing colorful spots before her eyes, gradually obscuring the surrounding world. Then it would pass, and a strange apathy would set in again. Valentina lived like this for about 2 months. The feeling of total loneliness and uselessness had become almost habitual. Before, her parents and husband loved her, and Val, accordingly, adored her loved ones. And now? Why was she even living in this world now? Unpleasant thoughts began to visit the woman. What if she ended this meaningless existence? It wasn't difficult, well, why should she stay here? What for? For whom? It was precisely at this difficult moment for Valentina that she felt the first movements of the child under her heart, cautious, timid pushes that no mother could mistake for anything else. Val had almost forgotten that she was pregnant. So much had fallen upon her. But she wasn't alone. Soon her baby would be born, Leonard's child. Perhaps he would look like him. Val strongly hoped for this. From then on, the woman pulled herself together. She suddenly clearly realized that she would soon become a mother. This meant she had to hold on for the baby's sake. A child. He wasn't guilty of anything. He was so fragile, so vulnerable. He needed someone to lean on in this crazy world. And that person would be her, Val. The woman seemed to wake up from a deep, terrible dream and got down to business. There wasn't much time left until the birth. She needed to solve many more issues and problems. Firstly, to get the insurance money for the burned house. This amount should be just enough for the time Val wouldn't be able to work, if she economized, of course. Secondly, she needed to get all the necessary documents at the maternity clinic. Thirdly, it was time to start gathering a trousseau for the baby. A child needed so many things. A stroller, a crib, diapers, undershirts. All these tasks and worries distracted Valentina from her heavy thoughts. She began to enjoy life again. The woman eagerly awaited the baby's arrival. She wanted to look into the familiar face, see the familiar features of her husband and parents in it, feel that she was no longer alone. Valentina, in her desire to save as much money as possible for her maternity leave, worked until late in her pregnancy. She washed floors, doing the only thing she was good at. She had to carry heavy buckets of water, bend down, reach. As a result, labor began a little earlier than expected. Val didn't expect this. Nothing had indicated it, as they say. Anyway, an ambulance was called for the young cleaner right at work. From there, she went to the maternity hospital. Several hours of torment, and her treasure, a tiny girl, was placed on the chest of the new mother. The baby looked strange. She was wrinkled and somehow purple. The little one was immediately taken to the premature infant ward. For some time, Val didn't know what was wrong with her girl. The doctors didn't say anything specific. They brushed her off. Anything can happen. "What do you expect, Mother? You didn't carry to term." The senior nurse answered all of Val's questions irritably. "They don't take care of themselves first, and then they suffer." What Val went through during those days until her baby's condition stabilized. She had never been so scared. The woman prayed for only one thing, that her girl would survive. Everything else was unimportant. If there were any health problems, that was fine. They would cope with everything. The main thing was that the baby lived. Valentina definitely wouldn't have endured another loss right now. And Sally survived. Moreover, she was discharged from the hospital as a completely healthy child, without any diagnoses. Only her low weight reminded them of her prematurity. Val thought she would fatten her daughter up, but she remained fragile, almost transparent. However, it looked even beautiful and touching. Sarah, as Valentina had hoped, strongly resembled her father. She was just as clear-eyed, smiling, charming. At times, Lenny's features were so clearly visible in the baby that the woman felt as if her husband himself was looking at her. This made her heart warmer and lighter. It was hard for Valentina alone with a newborn baby in her arms. Until Sally was 2.5 years old and went to nursery school, Val couldn't work. The money was only enough for the bare necessities: apartment rent, food, a minimal set of clothes. Sometimes Sally got sick, then she had to spend money on medicine. Valentina's savings were rapidly dwindling. State benefits were minimal. And yet, the young mother felt happy. She had a daughter, a wonderful girl, smart and beautiful, her pride and joy. Val felt needed and loved again. They say that other people's children grow up quickly. Val saw for herself that this statement also applies to one's own offspring. Time flew by with dizzying speed. Here Sarah is already going to kindergarten. From a tiny baby, she has turned into a princess girl with lush ponytails. A change of scene, and Sarah is a first grader. Val still remembered crying at the school assembly, sending her daughter to school. She felt sorry for the child. Now a lot was required of her baby, sitting through long lessons, doing homework. And what if Sally had mean teachers who would scold her? Val had exactly such teachers in middle school. Sarah, on the contrary, glowed with happiness at the assembly. She couldn't wait to grow up, become an adult and independent, to help her mother. The girl saw how hard it was for Val, how her back and legs ached after work. A few more years flew by as if in a fog, and now Sarah was a high school student. Her studies weren't great. She tried. Val saw it, but nothing came of it. The woman wasn't upset and certainly didn't shame her daughter. Neither Val herself nor Leonard could boast of academic success. So why be surprised? That wasn't the main thing. Sarah grew up kind, sensitive, attentive, and very wise. In practical matters, by her teenage years, she already knew how to save money and could cook a delicious dinner or lunch with a minimal amount. This was more important for life than knowing how to solve complex equations. And what a beauty Sarah turned out to be. Slender, large-eyed, fair-skinned. Guys turned their heads after the girl. Sarah herself didn't notice this, but Val saw it and was proud of her girl. If only she got a good husband. That meant a lot to a woman. Sarah graduated from the construction technical school and got a job. Her crew consisted mostly of young girls like herself. Nothing complicated was required of them, just cleaning up objects after the workers had finished there. Val was happy for her daughter. Yes, Sarah's work didn't require high qualifications. The pay wasn't that attractive, but at least Sarah had a job, and her work wasn't that physically demanding and exhausting. And then Sarah fell in love. Valentina understood it immediately by her daughter's eyes, by her mysterious smile. Later, Sarah herself confessed that, yes, there was such a guy, a wonderful one. His name was Nicholas, and their relationship seemed to be getting serious. When Sarah described her chosen one to her mother, she became thoughtful. He was out of her league, a student at a prestigious university, the son of a quite wealthy mother. Sarah wouldn't fit in with such a family. Sarah, of course, was beautiful and hard-working, but the levels of the groom and bride were too uneven. But Sarah assured her mother that everything would be fine with her and Nicholas, that the guy seemed genuinely in love with the young beauty, even talked about marriage. True, first he wanted to acquire his own place, and for that, he needed to spend several years abroad. Even then, Val suspected something. She didn't like it. The woman felt that Nicholas was simply fooling her daughter, that he would play around a bit and then leave, go abroad for fun, forget Sarah, and she would wait for him and suffer alone. She was naive, believed everything, so simple-hearted. And so, Nicholas left. And then it turned out that Sarah was expecting his child. What a surprise. Valentina insisted on terminating the pregnancy. She didn't believe that Nicholas would acknowledge the child. And the two women couldn't manage on their own. They barely made ends meet. Most likely the guy had already forgotten about Sally, and she naively believed that he would be thrilled by this news. My foolish child. Valentina shook her head. I told her to give up her fantasies. Nicholas hung on to every word she said. But my daughter stood her ground, said you would be happy to hear such news. True, my girl didn't know how to tell you everything. Your phone was unreachable, you didn't answer letters. All this convinced me even more that you had simply run away from Sarah and cut all ties. I didn't know who was involved in all this. I only guessed later. Everything finally fell into place just now, after talking to you. I wrote to Sarah too. I wrote often, Nicholas choked out. There were problems with communication here then, but I wrote her letters every evening, and she was the one who didn't answer. No wonder, Val smirked. Your mother. She apparently intercepted your and her letters, didn't let you communicate. She really didn't like her future daughter-in-law, the simple girl. How do you know? Nicholas breathed out. I guessed. It's a pity I didn't guess sooner. But wait. You'll understand soon enough. Listen. Not receiving any response from her beloved, Sarah decided to talk to his mother. Of course, your mother wasn't thrilled about this meeting. Upon learning of Sarah's pregnancy, she became furious. First, she screamed at my girl, accusing her of trying to deceive everyone, to extort money from the guy's wealthy relatives. Then she threatened to take the child, as he would be left with a mother who had no money and no place of her own. Of course, the prosperous father of the baby would be given custody, and Sarah would be deprived of all rights to her son or daughter. Nicholas's mother said many hurtful things to Sarah. She stood there half dead with fear. Sarah was seriously scared for the child then. She already loved him and was afraid of losing her little one. What if Nicholas's mother really carried out her threats? What if she took the baby? It was then that Sarah realized she needed to leave the city, far away from this terrible woman who seemed capable of anything. And Nicholas, he, as the girl thought then, wouldn't support her anymore. According to your mother, you had forgotten all about Sarah, Valentina continued. She said that you already had a girlfriend there, and that in your conversations you didn't even ask about Sarah, only shared happy details of your new life. This seemed quite plausible. I also thought, based on her words, that's how it would all turn out. Sarah came back after that conversation in tears. She sobbed, begged her mother to move. She wanted to hide. Sarah regretted her actions. It was in vain that she went to Nicholas's mother then. Nothing good came of it, only trouble. Well, we moved, Valentina sighed. We settled here, in Northwood. Why not? Nothing held us in Preston, no place of our own, no good job. So, at least in that sense, my daughter and I were free. Sarah so wanted to hide. She was very afraid that your mother would carry out her threats and take the child. I didn't believe it, of course, but for my daughter's peace of mind I agreed. And here we are. Mother and daughter quickly settled into their new place. This town was much smaller than Preston. Accordingly, in some ways, life was even easier for the small family here. Prices were lower, the atmosphere calmer. Exactly on time, Stephen was born, a healthy, strong baby. The grandmother and mother doted on the little one. He reciprocated. It seemed Stephen understood from infancy how difficult things were for his loved ones, and therefore he was practically an ideal child. He slept a lot, ate well, didn't fuss, listened to his grandmother and mother. Everything would have been fine, But the family didn't have much money. Valentina and Sarah worked as cleaners. Both earned pennies, which were barely enough for the bare necessities: apartment rent, food, a minimal set of clothes. Stephen didn't have expensive toys, gadgets, or fashionable clothes, but he never complained or demanded anything from his mother and grandmother. On the contrary, he assured them that when he grew up, he would buy them everything. Well, we lived not richly, but happily and peacefully. Valentina continued her story, tears welling up in her eyes. And then the tragedy. With Sally, like a bolt from the blue. She got sick, didn't go to the doctor, continued working, went around with a fever, scrubbed floors in cold water. She hid her condition from me until the very end. I wouldn't have let her go to work, although we desperately needed the money. I noticed when she was completely bedridden. I called an ambulance and Sally went to the hospital. It immediately turned out to be bilateral pneumonia, and it was already advanced. They couldn't save her, and so Stephen and I were left alone. Valentina had experienced many losses in her life, but what happened to Sarah hit her the hardest. Perhaps if it weren't for Stephen, the elderly woman wouldn't have survived. But she had to stay strong for her grandson, and Valentina pulled herself together. She worked again, cleaned again, and cooked lunches and dinners, and also supported her grandson, who also had a hard time. It was no joke to be left without a mother at 8 years old. The old woman's speech flowed smoothly, like a river. Nicholas was overwhelmed by various feelings. His heart ached that Sarah was now lost forever. Yes, he was used to living without her, but Nicholas knew that she was somewhere, living, feeling something, laughing, maybe even remembering him sometimes. And now it turned out, this was it. But on the other hand, it seemed Nicholas had found a son. After all, Stephen, by all accounts, turned out to be his child, his and Sarah's, their continuation, their future. Why didn't Sarah turn to me for help even in the most difficult times? Nicholas choked out. She knew where to find me. I wasn't hiding and didn't even change my place of residence. I was in Preston the whole time. We were afraid, Valentina sighed. Your mother. She made it clear that if we made any claims, she would sue for custody of the child. How were we to know that you wouldn't side with her? That's why we hid. How could Sarah? How could she think that I... Nicholas didn't finish. Tears were welling up, but he really didn't want to cry now, on a bench in front of Sarah's mother. Don't judge. Valentina gently patted the man's shoulder. We were afraid for Stevie, you understand? And fear is a bad advisor. And Sarah was offended by you at first for finding someone else there. And later she often looked at your photos on social media, where you were with different girls. But I didn't have anyone there during the internship, Nicholas exclaimed. I worked like Papa Carlo just to earn money for an apartment faster, to live together with Sarah, happily, peacefully. That's just how fate is. Valentina shook her head. Fate, you know, is quite a trickster. And even now, what was the probability that we would meet here? Practically zero. But still, we're sitting on a bench talking. I want to see my son, Nicholas suddenly said. Stevie, yours. He is mine, isn't he? He is yours, Valentina smiled. You'll see the boy. All doubts will disappear. Grandma, hi, where did you come from? A slightly hoarse, boyish voice was heard from behind Nicholas. The man turned sharply and saw a tall, thin teenager. It was as if lightning struck him. This child. He was the spitting image of Nicholas from his childhood photos, only dressed and haircut differently. The teenager looked at Nicholas with disbelief. And here comes Stevie. Valentina smiled. Are you done with work? Yes, that's why I came. They paid me well. Let's go home. You don't need to stand here anymore today. Stephen didn't seem to understand yet that Nicholas wasn't just a random passerby. Wait, Valentina hesitated suddenly. I want to introduce you to someone nice here. This is Nicholas, Uncle Nick. I am your father, Nicholas stated directly, and without any preparation. The words just came out. He didn't like this, Uncle Nick. What kind of uncle was he to Stephen? You... The boy's eyes widened in surprise. His eyebrows shot up to his bangs. Of course, the confession shocked the boy, but somewhere deep in his eyes, a flicker of joy and relief appeared. Several years passed. Valentina and Stephen now lived in Preston again. Nicholas bought them an apartment next to his. More accurately, all three of them lived together, as one family. Nicholas still wasn't speaking to his mother. Then, after the chance meeting with Valentina and meeting Stephen, the man returned to Preston and immediately went to his parent. They had a long and difficult conversation. His mother, of course, hadn't expected such a turn of events. And who could have thought? She didn't know what had happened to Sarah later. She wasn't even interested in whether that child had been born. The woman had believed all these years that she had done the right thing, saved her only child from a greedy poor girl, prevented her from ruining her son's fate. At first, his mother denied it, didn't want to admit that she had once acted so disgustingly towards Sarah, and didn't mention the intercepted letters. That old woman spun you a yarn to dump her grandson on you, and you believed her. And this boy, the probability that he's your son is minimal. Nicholas could have argued a lot against these words. Stevie was his. There was no doubt about that now. Nicholas even had an official document confirming his relationship with the boy. The man had ordered a DNA test almost immediately. Not because he doubted anything. Stevie was too much like himself as a child. It was just that this test was needed for official adoption, and Nicholas, of course, intended to take Stevie under his wing. The boy had already lived in conditions not very suitable for a child for so many years. Now that would end. Nicholas pleaded with his mother for a long time then to tell him the truth. She evaded, avoided answering, so he guessed everything from her behavior. But then his mother finally broke down. She called Sarah and Valentina terrible names, described the prospects of her son's terrible future if he had tied his fate to that poor girl. Nicholas looked at his mother and pressed his lips together tightly. His closest, dearest person. She had dedicated her whole life to him, done so much for her only son, helped him make something of himself. And it was his mother who, with her own hands, had once destroyed his happiness. Nicholas tried not to think about what would have happened if, upon returning, he had found Sarah in Preston. Stephen would have been about 2 years old then. Of course, they would have gotten married, bought the apartment they had dreamed of, and lived happily. In a couple of years, Stephen would have had a brother or sister. Sarah would have been alive. Nicholas hadn't spoken to his mother for about 2 years now, but he wasn't the one who initiated this silence. His mother herself was offended by him. She was deeply indignant that her son didn't appreciate her contribution to his own future. And she also tried to forbid him, a grown, established man, from communicating with Stephen and Valentina. Upon learning that her son was going to formalize paternity for the boy, the woman became furious. "What are you doing? Have you gone completely mad? You're going to put your mistress's son on your neck and his grandmother too. How do you know whose he is? Who knows what kind of genes the boy has? You'd be better off marrying a decent woman with a child if you want a family so much." She said many unpleasant and angry things about Stephen and Valentina. Nicholas tried to calm his mother, to explain his view of the situation. It was useless. The elderly woman reacted to any mention of her grandson like a bull to a red rag. She lost her temper, became irritable, swore obscenely. Nicholas felt sorry for his mother, but he wasn't going to abandon his child to satisfy her whims, especially since he and his son had immediately taken to each other. And so his mother was offended and stopped communicating with Nicholas. He periodically made attempts to reconcile. He knew that sooner or later his parent, despite her firm, stubborn character, would soften. And for now, he had plenty to do anyway. They had so much to catch up on with Stephen. Son and father now often went on vacation, sometimes to the sea, sometimes to the mountains. The teenager genuinely admired the world around him, so eagerly absorbing new impressions. Son and father talked a lot. Stephen turned out to be an interesting and wise conversationalist beyond his years, and now, since the boy didn't have to work, his studies had improved. In the prestigious gymnasium where Nicholas had enrolled his son, he quickly became one of the best students. Valentina was always there too. How could it be otherwise? She had raised Stephen for so many years. Grandmother and grandson had become the closest and dearest people to each other. Of course, they couldn't be separated. Nicholas's personal life also improved. Finally, he met a woman who was interesting and close to him in spirit. She didn't resemble the flighty beauties with whom Nicholas often had romances in his past life. Irene worked as an accountant. She was raising a son from her first marriage, the same age as Stephen, alone. The boys quickly found common ground. These were the guys. Nicholas smiled, watching the teenagers enthusiastically discussing something or repairing a bicycle together. It seemed they would all make a strong, friendly family. Irene immediately became friends with Stephen and with Valentina too. Peace, harmony, tranquility, mutual support. Nicholas felt warm and light-hearted. And his mother? His mother would understand everything in time. She was already unhappy with her own stubbornness. Nicholas had noticed it. Sooner or later, his mother would soften. That time was not far off. No one held any ill will towards her anymore. It was just that his mother probably found it difficult to understand this. It was all right. Everything would work out.